Welcome in. It is another NFL preview here on Sports by the Book. I'm Jeff Parles. She is Alex White. Rolling along here in the NFL 2025 season previews. And today we reach a team that usually goes in with high expectations and usually falls short. Not quite the case this year with the expectations. We head down to Dallas, Alex, with a new era for the Cowboys. Of course, year 2 of Dak's gigantic contract and a new head coach in Brian Schottenheimer.
Of course, just an 8 for their win total going into the year, as Jeff alluded to. Lower expectations than normal. We're used to seeing them at 9.5 or 10.5. But I do think that the bookmakers have it right, and I think it's going to be a tough transition year for them. Of course, no Mike McCarthy, who has been the head coach for a few years now in Dallas. So we'll get right to it. But, I mean, we've already covered a team in this division. We've talked about the brutal schedule, the brutal matchups that they will be facing. And then, of course, with the emergence of the Washington Commanders and the Eagles being the top team to knock off.
You look at the NFC East. Well, actually, we'll look at the schedule and we'll go to the NFC East in a little bit. But again, Dallas, these are numbers we have not seen realistically speaking, over the last decade. Plus, now for Dallas, a win total of 8, juice to the under. That had moved up from 7.5. It was 7.5 for a pretty darn long time until about the middle of July. Plus 650, the third favorite to win the division. Been a while since they haven't been in the top 2 going into the year, whether it's Philly, the Giants, and now, of course, Washington squarely into that second slot. But, Alex, you mentioned it. We already have previewed the Giants, and we both thought, hey, this roster's vastly improved. They're good. Can't have worse QB play than they had a year ago. And how do we find more than 6 wins for the Giants? We really couldn't because of how difficult their schedule is. There's the whole list as of this point of recording with the Dallas numbers and everyone above and below them in the division. But you just look at this Dallas Cowboys schedule across the board, and this is going to be the theme. And this is why Washington has a lower win total than I would imagine a lot of people would have thought going into the year. This is why Philadelphia can realistically only peak at an 11.5 win total. The way that this schedule crosses up is brutal. But that's the case when your cross divisions are the NFC North, which to me is the best division in the NFC, and the AFC West, which is the best division in the AFC. So it's a really brutal schedule, and you can see those first 4 weeks. All right, you got opening night against Philadelphia. You knew you were going to be a dog in that game. Eagles getting to raise the banner at home in front of their fans. All right, fine. It's 6.5, 7, depending on what books have those numbers out and where they have them at the moment. All right, they'll be favored against the Giants. They should win week 2. But then the next 2 weeks, you go to Chicago and you play Green Bay. Look, it is critical, especially with that 3-game stretch from week 5 to week 7, where you play on the road at 2 teams with low win totals of the Jets and Carolina. And you get Washington at home, a team that, of course, remember, Dallas beat Washington twice a year ago. So this is a critical scenario for the Cowboys to get off to not a 1-3 start, steal one of those other games, and you give yourself a path before the schedule gets insane in week 8, when it is brutal until week 18 against the Giants, where they play, other than the Raiders, teams that we expect to be in playoff contention this year from week 8 beyond.
My big thing here, Jeff, and I'm glad that you brought up that the Washington Commanders probably have a lower team total than a lot of people would expect. And we know that they did have their struggles defensively, right? Them, the Giants, and the Cowboys all really struggled defensively last year. And the Cowboys finished 29th in rushing defense. And what have they done to fix that this year? You talked about the crossover. All of those teams are run-first teams. They're going to play the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears, all very good on the ground. And then with the West, it's the exact same thing with the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Raiders now pick up Ashton Genty and want to run the ball first as well. So it's going to be a tough go for them. They do have a younger front 4. Micah Parsons leading the way. Of course, they do have to finish that and get him signed. And he needs to be a leader for that younger core up there with their tackles and their edge rushers. So I just think it's an uphill battle. I couldn't even get there with 7 wins for the Dallas Cowboys. I know a lot of people kind of like them as a sexy pick to make a run, and maybe they are undervalued, and this is the year that they could. That's just on the defensive side. So offensively, can they be great? Yes, I do think they can. They have definitely put in a lot to their offensive line. Dak Prescott's coming back, and then they get George Pickens, a true number one to go with CD Lamb. So offensively, I'm not too concerned. I'm just really worried on the defensive side. Third DC in 3 years for them as well. And they're all big names too. And it hasn't worked out with any of them. Well, Dan Quinn actually left them.
Quinn was pretty good.
But pretty surprised with Zimmer not working out there.
Yeah, game passed the guy by, I'd say more than anything. Just the one thing offensively that I want to bring up real quick for Dallas. You mentioned Pickens. Gives them a high-end number 2 if Pickens has his head on right, which we know is the issue in Pittsburgh for a good chunk of that. Their running back, there are 2 things that I'm concerned with Dallas. Their running back room is a joke. Their running back room is just an absolute joke. They have, okay, all right, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders at one point in their careers, all right, could be considered number 1s. They're 2s at best at this point. And then they have 2 late round draft picks in Blue out of Texas and Maffa out of Clemson, who, look, maybe one of the 2 of them surprises and ends up being a legitimate back, but odds are they won't. And then you're replacing a Hall of Famer on the offensive line. Zach Martin retires after a Hall of Fame caliber career. He may not get in first ballot in Camden, but he's going to get there one day. It's just a matter of how quickly the voters put him in. You replace him with a first-round pick in Tyler Booker. All right, big expectations at right guard. But that right side of the line, I'm not a huge fan of Terrence Steele, who's the projected number 1 tackle on the right side. I've always had my questions with Smith and Guyton. Oh, by the way, you have questions at center as well with Beebe.
Yep.
That was the one thing we always knew with Dallas. Like, even through the years where their roster was flawed, we knew up front on the offensive line that they were going to be, all right, as long as Martin stays healthy, as long as Tyron Smith stays healthy, they're going to be a top 5 to 8 offensive line more years than not. And now I'm not sure that that's really there. And now with Dak, where we've now seen Dak multiple times in his career miss more than half a seasons with major injuries. We've now seen this multiple times. And that concerns me moving forward, especially playing in a division where you see Philadelphia twice, elite defense. Washington, if they have a strength, it's their pass rush on defense. So that concerns me. And then you have to play the NFC North and the AFC West, where, my goodness, the AFC West, you have to play Max Crosby. You have to play that Denver defense, which might be the best defense in the NFL. Karl Loftus just got paid in Kansas City. Oh, and Chris Jones is there up front. I mean, and then the NFC North teams, again, like Aiden Hutchinson's back. The Vikings defense last year was elite pass rushing wise. You have all these questions of how are they going to be able to block as well, which was not the case in the past. And again, it also comes back to Shoddy. Like, Shoddy's been between a slightly above average to slightly below average offensive coordinator most of his career. He spiked some years where he was the offensive coordinator of the 2009 and 2010 Jets that made back-to-back AFC title games. He's been Dak Prescott's right-hand man in Dallas. That's part of the reason he got the job, that great relationship he and Dak had while Mike McCarthy was the head coach and Shoddy was there as the QB coach and the OC through the years. But this is hard-pressed for me to offensively see it, Alex, unless if the offensive line surprises me. That's what it comes down to.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you're right. I was more just looking at that they have definitely drafted in the last few years to build up this offensive line, but without Zach Martin there and a leader, it does make it a little bit tougher. And I have been talking about their lack of run game for a couple years now. So I'm with you. I'm not impressed with what they've done with the running back room, and I think that's just going to make it harder on Dak Prescott and his weapons in his wide receivers. So all in all, I was already worried about their defense. Now you just convinced me their offense. I agree with the books. I do think it should be juiced to the under with that 8. I think 7.5 was actually probably the correct number they put out.
So that defense that you mentioned real quick, again, Parsons has the contract dispute going on. Really don't like their other pass rushers on this team other than Parsons. I think they're weak in the middle of that defensive front as well, unless Amazi Smith takes a really big leap forward, which we haven't really seen yet through 2 years.
Yep.
Linebacker wise, all right. Okay, and like Murray comes over from Tennessee, but how much? Not an elite guy anymore. Really just a big tackler more than anything. And then there's questions in the secondary. I think, again, you have Diggs, who's coming off significant injury. You have Bland, who, after the pick six of Palooza, has been relatively, again, not healthy, and I think was a boom or bust guy to begin with. It's funny. I actually was fully prepared going into the prep work. Like, all right, you know what? Dallas over 7.5. I could see the argument. But as you go through the roster, you go through the schedule, 7-10 feels right for this team with a below average defense and an offense that, look, has these skill position players, even with that weak backfield, has as maybe as good of a 1-2 punch wide receiver wise as there is in the NFL, and a quarterback. When Dak is right, Dak's a top 10 guy. There's no arguing that at this point. But is he capable of being right behind a mediocre offensive line? But when push comes to shove, they went 7-10 last year. I think 7-10 is where they land yet again here and finish in third place in the division, Alex.
I literally was thinking, and, kind of hearing the talking heads, and, maybe Dallas is underrated and they could make a run here, but you're right. And that is why you have power ratings and you compare and you go through the whole schedule and you really break down the roster. Each player has a power rating, right? And then do the comparing. I would be more willing to say that they finished last than first in this division. Honestly, I think that it is just a big gap between the Eagles and the Commanders, and then the Cowboys and the Giants as of right now with where the rosters stand.
You look at those props on the side. Dak is 30-1 to win the MVP. Is the betting favorite to be the comeback player of the year at plus 250. The loaded market this year. Just I'll tell you, don't bet J.J. McCarthy in that. He hasn't come back from anything, hasn't played an NFL game, and he's like the fifth favorite on that board. But Dak and Aiden Hutchinson, depending on which book you're at, again, that is a pretty sizable 1-2 punch at the top. I think Hutchinson should be favored coming off of that significant leg injury, especially since we'll get to the Lions later. But Hutchinson is the rightful favorite in my book to be Defensive Player of the Year. It's going to be awfully tough for Dak to win that award if Hutchinson comes back. And again, I know NFL voters are weird with giving a guy 2 awards in the same award season, but if Hutchinson wins Defensive Player of the Year, it's inexcusable if he doesn't win Comeback Player of the Year as well. So keep that in mind when you're betting this. By the way, Parsons, who will be on, is the second favorite here for Dallas as the Defensive Player of the Year. I would not bet that. I think that number's too short for a guy I'm not convinced is going to play all 17 games. And if they don't get that contract done before the season, who knows? Who knows what type of effort? He's going to get paid one way or another. Who knows what type of effort we get out of Parsons for a full season if he's not under contract long term.
Plus, Defensive Player of the Year, it's tough. If we're talking about 7 wins here, it's going to be a hard award for them to win. I mean, of course, if they are leading it, but him and Myles Garrett kind of dropped down my list because of that reason.
One more thing I want to bring up. We brought up Schottenheimer before. Coach of the Year, he's 30-1. Obviously, the way we're talking about Dallas here, neither of us are interested in that. The path is very simple for him. Dallas, you make the playoffs, and you push Philadelphia to the brink of winning that division. Or again, remember, this is a division no one's won back-to-back years in 20-plus years. Again, crazy stuff happens all the time. There's always one unexpected division winner every year in the NFL. At least it seems that way, maybe less of late with the dominance of these high-end teams, especially in the AFC. But there's a path. There's a path for Schottenheimer. Again, I wouldn't bet it. I think realistically, he should be where Kevin Stefanski and Zach Taylor are near the bottom. Not quite the guys who, again, you may be looking at this and like, why are Sirianni, Andy Reid, and John Harbaugh the 3 longest shots? It's almost impossible for those, unless if one of those teams pops a 16-1 or an undefeated. It's almost impossible for teams with big time expectations for having the Coach of the Year having a Coach of the Year winner when you have the 3 of the 4 highest win totals in the NFL, which those teams have. So just keep that in mind when you're betting this market as well.
I think this market is even a little bit of the Dallas tax that we do see, where bettors do just want to bet on what they want to see, right? And they want to see Dallas be good again. So taking a shot here in that market.
All right. I think we've done enough here on the Cowboys. Not positive for either of us. As you see, it's 2-1 to make the postseason. Alex and I do not want that. 12-1 to win the NFC title. We definitely don't want that. Again, 30-1 to win it all. We don't want any of that. We don't want anything positive here on Dallas. Again, but I feel like 7.5, 8, about right on that win total. I have 7-10. I know you're about in the same pocket as me, so I guess slightly into the under at under 8 for both of us on the win total. But again,
I'm like 6 or 7. It's a
it's a good bet for you then, potentially. But again, Dak Prescott has shown through his career when he has been able to stay healthy and the chips do seem down. Dak is capable of popping a big time season and maybe a surprise, getting a 7 seed, winning 9 games. Could be in the cards, but you and I just don't see that.
2023 runner-up, right, for the MVP and led the league in touchdown passes that year. So, yes, you are 100% correct. We have seen it from Dak, and that is why I got that big contract. But I just don't think the full roster is built yet.
Yeah, I don't think anything's built. And again, the days, I know Cowboy fans are counting on the days when Jerry Jones is no longer doing the GM work as well down there in Big D. All right, that's been a Dallas Cowboy preview. Cowboy fans, we're sorry if you're upset with us, but we're just telling you what we feel going into the season. We're not high on this Cowboy team going into the 2025 season. Plenty of previews already available on the YouTube page. Make sure you're subscribed at Sports by the Book on YouTube. If you want our live content, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 12 noon in the Central Time Zone. Monday through Friday, Alex and I give you the best in sports betting, all the baseball, all the football, everything that goes on in sports betting, Monday through Friday, right here at the South Point studio here at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. So be on the lookout for our show. Follow us on social as well as you see on the bottom of your screen. Until next time, Alex, we have plenty more to get to here in the NFL previews.
Right.
She's Alex White. I'm Jeff Parles. We'll see you again next time. This has been a preview of the Dallas Cowboys for the 2025 season here on Sports by the Book.